we are live now. It's just refreshing on my screen.
Cool.
And then I will, while you're doing your first reading, I'll tweet a link as well to help people find it. Okay, there we go. Right, I can see us. We are officially streaming. I'm muting YouTube. Right, great. Okay, fab. Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bookwanderers Club. New week. Hope you've all had nice weekends, and thank you to those of you who joined in with the Bookwanderers quiz on Friday, which is still up on my YouTube channel if you want to go back and do it again. Today we're back to our kind of normal format, and our special guest today is Ross MacKenzie, author of 5 books, I think now.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5.
The Nowhere Emporium, but also most recently, it just came out earlier this year, I believe.
Yes, February.
Evernight. So we're going to kind of follow our usual structure of Ross has got a couple of readings, I've got some questions, you'll be able to ask some questions online, and then we'll finish with a writing prompt. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask Ross to give us a kind of little sort of brief introduction to Evernight and give us the first reading.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Evernight is it's my new book, and I'm a big fan of history, specifically Victorian history. Victorian London fascinates me, and one of the things that really captured my imagination was a specific job that people did back in Victorian London, set in the sewers, and this job was called a tosher, Tosher, and this was a sewer treasure hunter. And as soon as I knew that this was a job that people did, quite often children would go down into the sewers and they would search for lost things. As soon as I knew that was a job, a real thing that real people did, I knew I had to write about it. Evernight is my, I suppose, love letter to like Victorian London and magic and all those amazing things ingredients that I like to put in all my books. Magic, mystery, a little bit of humor, some darkness, all those things all mixed together. The hero is a girl called Lara, who is the greatest sewer treasure hunter in all of the huge city of Kingshaven, which is sort of based on Victorian London. And one day when Lara is down in the sewers, she finds a lost treasure, which changes her life. So I'll read a chapter, a very short chapter from the beginning of the book called Beneath the Streets. And this is our introduction to Lara and her world in the tunnels under Kingshaven. So here we go. Lara Bell Fox was sheltering in the tunnels beneath the city when she heard a commotion. She almost didn't notice, such was the great cacophony of rain and wind and rushing water barreling through the darkened sewers. Rivers of rain had fed the stream, leaving many of the tunnels inaccessible. Fierce water rumbled past her feet, splashing her wax-coated boots, gurgling and foaming, carrying twigs and leaves and drowned rats and cats. Lara's eyes were sharp and alert, and they flicked here and there and all about, watching the water as it passed through the golden light from the dragon breath lamp tied around her neck. Her muddled reflection stared back at her from the rough surface. 13 years old and brown-skinned and fiercely focused. She was hoping to glimpse shining things in the waters, coins or lost jewellery. But it was not treasure that caught her attention now. It was the sound of an argument. Lara extinguished her lamp and crushing darkness folded in on top of her. A newcomer to the tunnels would have been instantly lost, but not Lara. Lara breathed deep and stayed calm. Creeping forward, she followed the voices, the sound of her footsteps smothered by the stream. Around a bend she went to an intersection where several sewers met. Light spilled from an adjacent tunnel, and Lara slowed, crouching low against the smooth, cold brick. She peeked around the corner, tingling with curiosity. There were 5 of them, 5 boys. Each was dressed in a tosher's things, a wax-coated jacket and boots and gloves with a dragon breath lamp hanging around his neck. 4 of the boys were large, almost men, but the fifth was younger and much smaller. The 4 larger boys had formed a circle around the smaller one. "It's mine." His hand hovered protectively on the Toshing bag slung over his shoulder. "I found this stuff fair and square. I'm not even on your patch." "Well, we've decided to expand," said one of the older boys. His head was pale and shaved, his voice gravelly from all the pipes he smoked. His name was Vin Cotton, and Lara knew about him and his gang and was wary of coming across them. I reckon the tunnel running under Milk Street belongs to us now, which means the loot you find there is ours too. He pointed to the bag. You can't just claim tunnels, said Joe. And who's going to stop us? You? Lara bristled at this, felt her hackles rise. Cotton was a coward and a bully. Last chance. Joe shook his head. I need whatever I can get. My granny's ill, she needs looking after. Cotton held up a finger to quiet him. Then he brought a knife out from his coat and pushed the point of the blade against Joe's throat. Not enough to draw blood, but certainly enough to frighten Joe out of his wits. Lara almost cried out. I don't give a hag's tongue about your granny. You need to learn a lesson in respect, sunshine. He nodded to the others. Take everything he's got. They closed in. Thinking quick, Lara reached into her own Toshing bag and brought out a bent metal spoon she'd found in the tunnels earlier. She stood up, reared back, and threw the spoon as far down the sewer as she could manage. It hit the wall with a clang, and Cotton and his gang spun around and held up their lamps. Who's there? Run, Joe! Run! And we'll leave it there.
Amazing. Thank you. You said that you've kind of been inspired by history and a sort of past London, but this is obviously a fantastical version of it. I'd love to kind of hear about how you kind of what bits you kind of took from London, how you interpreted it, what research you did into sort of past Londons, and how you kind of made your own version inspired by it.
Okay, well, it's sort of an amalgamation between I'm down in London quite a lot now, and I just love it's an amazing city to walk around. The architecture and all these little alleyways and lanes and stuff, and it's a mixture of sort of modern day London, which is still a really historic city, and you can almost look back in time just by walking through the streets. It's amazing. And some of my favorite parts of other cities I've been to, like Barcelona as well. I love Barcelona, and I suppose it's just a mixture of taking my favorite parts of different places. You know, I love the idea that things are happening in the dark corners and the alleyways that we don't know about, and there's danger and magic out there. And that's pretty much how I came up with it. That, and really heavily influenced by Charles Dickens as well. I love reading Dickens and his version of London, which has become like iconic. The foggy lamplit streets and all that sort of stuff. So I guess it was just a real mixture of all the different things that were sort of floating around in my head from being in the places in modern days, and also from reading about London back in those days too.
I love you mentioned Barcelona. When I went to Barcelona, it's like a fantasy setting, isn't it? Like you don't even have to do like the buildings who's the really famous architect?
Gaudi.
Like all the Gaudi buildings, they're like, you can't believe that they're real. Like if people haven't been to Barcelona or aren't familiar, have a Google of kind of Barcelona buildings, and there's just these, like is it Park Güell? I don't know how you say it, but Spanish.
I think it's unbelievable. You're right. It's like some of them have sprouted out of the pages of fairy tales, and there they are in the middle of this one of the biggest cities in the world.
Right. I couldn't get over it. It's one of my favorite cities. I love it.
I just wandered around looking up all the time. It was unreal. Yeah,
it's an incredible city, and the way the city just like goes right up to the beach and the sea as well. It's just like a made-up place.
My geography is ridiculously bad. I had no idea Barcelona was even near the beach, and I was totally shocked when we did the bus tour and it stopped at the beach, and I was like, "Where are we?" So it's just brilliant. It has everything. It's one of my favorite cities in the world.
It's an incredible place. Yes, do some, if people are unfamiliar, do some Googling of Barcelona. It's an incredible city.
Do that.
Sorry, that was complete tangent. I wanted to ask you a bit more about Toshing, because you said about how, that's kind of also a real thing. That's not something I had. I mean, I guess mudlarking is something I come across, but that kind of word Toshing I hadn't come across until I read Evernight. Could you tell us a bit about the kind of real life roots of that, and then also about your character Lara and Joe, and kind of what that means for their kind of day-to-day lives?
Yeah, sure. Well, I came across the job when I was reading. I was reading a book called London. I'm a history geek, right? And I was reading a book called London Labour and the London Poor. by a guy called Henry Mayhew, who was like alive during Charles Dickens' time, and he was like a contemporary of Dickens. He was a journalist and all that sort of stuff. And he decided to investigate the sort of lower, what they called the lower classes of London back then, the slums and all the, and he gathered all these first-hand accounts from people who lived like mudlarks, like you said. And one of the people or a group of the people he spoke to were toshers, sewer treasure hunters. And so this was a group of people who would usually work on their own, but they would go down into the sewers and they would hunt for treasure, because, as we all know, the sewers under London are made of bricks, and the brick wears away and forms like fissures and cracks into which things can become lodged. So if you are a Victorian and you're walking along the street and you think to yourself, I think I'm going to buy a bag of roast chestnuts from that stall, and you bring out your purse or your wallet and you drop a coin, the coin might roll down the street, fall down the drain, clink, clink, splash into the sewer, where it becomes lodged. And so there was treasure down there. And toshers were brave souls who would venture down. They would risk their lives, because there were stories of rats the size of dogs down there. There were stories of strange sewer monsters, and there were pockets of gas which could explode, and the sewers could cave in and flood. And it just sounded like, it sounded too amazing to be a real thing, but it was. And then I read a book by Terry Pratchett called Dodger, which featured a tosher as well. And that was like, that lit the spark even further. But no, that's where it started, was reading Henry Mayhew's stuff, which is really, really worth looking at if you like history, because it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And toshers sometimes made quite good livings, by the way. Oh. Depending on what they found down there, yeah, they could make a fairly decent living.
I love that. I'm a history nerd too. I did history at university, although I'm more of it's early modern. Tudors is my jam. I can't get enough of it. I wanted to ask you about, you said at the start kind of that you like writing things that have a bit of a sort of strand of darkness in them, and Evernight does. Like, I was quite scared reading bits of it. How do you find the right level of darkness when you're writing? Or is that something that just comes instinctively?
That is a good question. First of all, I should say, if you're scared, I've done my job.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that. But yeah, I guess the way I look at it is that when I set out to write a story, I don't think to myself, okay, I'm going to write a story for 9 to 12-year-olds, and I write the story that's in my head, that's waiting to get out. And so far in my career, all those stories have been for a certain age group, for the middle grade, sort of 9 to 12 age group. So I guess maybe my mind is just wired that way. I don't really have to put I never really have to pare it back. There hasn't ever been a point where I've kind of thought to myself, oh, maybe that's a little bit too close to the bone. Because I think too that younger readers are often underestimated, and they love, they can handle being scared, and they love to be scared. So as long as you don't go too far, then I think it's a good thing. Yeah. And I guess, my mind's just wired a certain way. Maybe I can really remember how it felt to be a 9, 10-year-old, and it's really easy for me to get back into that headspace. So that's a really long answer for the question.
No, it's great. It's fascinating.
I guess it's just how my mind works.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Like, some of my most visceral reading memories from when I was that age are times that when I was scared. I can remember reading like Robin Jarvis books.
Yeah.
And I was being absolutely terrified and like almost too scared to keep reading, but had to know what was going on.
Yeah, totally.
Right now, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the book that made me want to be a writer was The Witches by Roald Dahl, which has some pretty scary parts in it.
Yeah, terrifying.
It was amazing. So kids love that element of fear, and because there's a really fine line between fear and laughter as well. Like, very often if you watch a scary movie and you do that jump thing, the first thing you do is laugh afterwards. So there's a kind of thrill about it as well.
For sure. Right, I think now would be a good point to hear another little taster of the book.
Sure. So this is a little bit later on. No spoilers, obviously, but Lara has discovered this treasure in the sewer, and it has catapulted her into this journey, and she's discovered that, you know, that there's a chance that she is a witch, and she doesn't quite know what to believe yet. So she has met an older witch called Bernie Whitecrow, who is adamant that Lara's a witch, and she is going to try to prove to Lara that she has these powers. So here we go. This is called Spell Writing, and it's a really, really short little piece. I said I'd prove you're a witch, said Bernie, blowing smoke rings. And this is how. You're going to write a spell. Lara leaned back. A spell? I can't do that. Take the pen, love. Bernie put the quill in Lara's hand. Writing spells isn't about how many textbooks you've read. It's about feeling, Lara. It's about listening to what's inside. But only a true witch can do it. Now, I'd like you to try making a light spell. It's a good one to start with in these circumstances. Lara looked at the quill in her hand, and then at her friend, Double Eight. But how? Double Eight shrugged. I've only ever written one spell, and that came out of a book. I wasn't allowed to try anything else. I'm learning same as you. Bernie motioned to the cauldron. The thing about spells, my loves, is they're different for everyone. A spell is like, well, I suppose it's like the recipe for a chocolate cake. Everyone has their own version of what it might be, their own flourishes and ingredients, and no two will ever be the same. Think about light. Think about what it means to you, how it makes you feel. What's the first thing light makes you think of? Lara considered this. Warmth. Good. Put that down on the paper best you can, but use symbols instead of words. Slowly, Lara lowered the quill to the paper and drew a simple, unmistakable image, the sun. What else does light make you feel? Asked Bernie. Lara's mind travelled back to the sewers under King's Haven, to the moment she would climb back to the surface and open the manhole cover, and she'd feel the relief at being back in the daylight. Safe, she said. Light makes me feel safe. Again, she touched the nib to the paper, this time drawing a simple little house, and a stick person inside that house. Good. Now try a couple more. When it's done, you'll feel it. What else does light mean to me? Thought Lara. Life. It means life. She drew a flower. And colour. But how do I draw that? Oh, I know. She drew an eye. And then she looked at the paper and the symbols she'd drawn. They made perfect sense to her. I think I'm done. All right, love. Now I want you to take that paper and put it in the cauldron. Into the fire, said Lara. Why? You'll see. Lara lifted the paper and dropped it into the flames. She watched it catch. Bernie leaned in. Now I want you to say these words. She whispered in Lara's ear, then sat back as Lara began to repeat. Born of mind, born of fire, born of Mother Earth's desire. Use it wisely, use it well. My heart, my blood, my gift, my spell. And then, as the paper blackened and turned to ash, the flames in the metal cauldron changed colour, from orange to dazzling new coin in the sun gold, and coils of glowing smoke drifted from the bowl. There we go.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I have got a couple more questions, but just to everyone who's watching, thank you for the people who've sent questions in so far, but I am about to ask your questions, so do make sure you've typed them in if you have a question for Ross. I have a few more kind of book wandering, reading sort of questions for you. So for people watching, so my books, you can travel inside of books. If you could travel inside of any of your books, which bit would you go to?
Oh, that's a good question.
Giving you some warning, I was going to ask you this one.
Bringing that one on me. I I think I would like to explore. I think I would like to explore Kingshaven, like for real.
Yeah.
I think it would be amazing to go somewhere that you'd made up in your own head. So to walk around those streets and yeah, maybe even go into the sewers with Lara and see if I could find some treasure.
Yeah.
Might
Yeah.
be quite interesting. Yeah, that's a really good question.
It's like, I used to ask people where they would bookwander into other people's books, but I actually have realized I find it much more interesting asking authors which bit of their own books that they would go inside.
Yeah,
I think it's always really interesting.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, another sort of, sorry to put you on the spot. If you could have dinner with any 3 authors, living or dead, who would you invite?
Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, and this is where it gets really difficult because there are not, well, probably J.K. Rowling. I would love to like hear from her how she felt as it all unfolded, as all the madness sort of unfolded around her.
Yeah.
So I think those would be my 3. Terry Pratchett, I love. I grew up on Terry Pratchett books. Neil Gaiman is probably my favourite author at the moment. And J.K. Rowling just... Oh, but then there's Roald Dahl too, because Roald Dahl was a spy during the Second World War, and he had... Oh, I don't know.
Apparently Roald Dahl is quite... Apparently he was quite... what's the word? Prickly? Is that the word?
Yeah, it probably depends what mood you caught him in.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with J.K. Rowling then.
And then I was going to ask you about what you've been reading on lockdown, and I've just seen as well that Sophie has also asked that in the questions. So yeah, what have you been reading over the past couple of weeks?
Okay, Sophie, I have been reading. I've been reading quite a lot of things actually. I've been reading. I sometimes have 2 or 3 books on the go at once. Do you do that?
I can't do that. Sometimes I have like a research book on the same time as like what I'm reading for pleasure, but I can't read more than one like novel at a time.
I would say my main one at the moment then, I'm kind of going between David Copperfield, which is like total comfort reading for me by Charles Dickens. But that's really dense and quite difficult to get into the mode of reading that because the language is so different in that book. Yeah. So between that and between Stephen King's new book, The Institute, which is tremendous as well.
Yeah.
But I have a huge book pile to get through. I've got tons of stuff waiting.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, this is also from Sophie, but I think this is a nice one to start with, because Sophie has said, which of your books would you recommend she started with?
Ooh. Do you know what age Sophie is? No.
Oh, no, I don't. I think she's a regular viewer. I think Sophie, so you have to pause. I think she's about 9.
Okay.
I would get Sophie. I'm sorry. I don't know that you've ever said how old you are on the chat.
Well,
so
I would
say about that age.
I would say, well, Evernight is just out, and the sequel is out next year. So that's probably a pretty good place to start because it's not too long before you can read the next one. And I would say Evernight's a good place to start because I also think that being an author is like anything else, and theoretically, the more you practice something, the better you become at it. So I hope that parts of each book are better than the last one. May not be the case, but yeah, I would start with probably. Okay.
She's just said that she's 7. So
7.
Evernight has got some scary bits, so you'd have to, I think, but that might be you might enjoy that. I'd say that
might be a cup of tea. The Nowhere Emporium is more sort of magical and pure sort of wonder and imagination. There are some dark bits in that too. So if that's more your cup of tea, then maybe the Nowhere Emporium. But if you don't mind like scary and dark, then Evernight, absolutely.
Great. this isn't a question, but I've had a comment saying that the kids at St John Bosco School love your books. So just
Thank you.
And Year 6 at Middleton Prep also are watching and said that they have just bought Evernight and Shadow Smith for the library and are really looking forward to getting reading.
I hope you enjoy.
Says that her mum read The Witches to her and it made her scared, but she wanted to read more. Can you remember which bits of The Witches made you scared?
That's a really good question. Who's this from?
This is Alice.
Alice, good question, Alice. You know, do we know if she's finished The Witches? Because I don't want to spoil it.
It sounds like yes.
Like she has.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's read The Witches to me, implying it's done.
Okay. So the part in The Witches where the boy, because you never know his name, the boy has snuck in. They're in the huge hotel on holiday, and he has snuck into the grand hall, and he's hiding behind like these boards and training his pet mice, and all these ladies filter in claiming to be holding a meeting of the RSPCC, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. But of course, as the boy listens to what's going on, he suddenly realizes that he is in a room with every witch in England. And I remember being like, we read that in primary 5, so I was 8 years old, almost 9. And our teacher, Miss McLean in P5, would gather us around her desk and we'd sit on the carpet while she read to us. And I remember if I was on the edge of a seat, I would have been right there, like on the edge of it. I was in those pages and I was scared and terrified, but I wanted to know what was going to happen next. Because how was he going to get out of this? He was in a room with all these witches. So that was the moment that I can remember mostly from that book.
It is such a great book. Hearing you talk about it makes me want to go and read it. Sean, who is in Year 6, wants to know how you come up with your ideas for your books.
Oh, that is the question. Authors are frightened of being asked that question. Do you want the truth? Is that I don't know. It's not a very interesting answer. I think ideas come from asking questions about the world. That for me is like the kind of crux of it. If you question everything, and what if's an amazing question. You know, what if this happened? What if that happened? But just ask questions about the world. Don't take everything, you know, as seen as how it has to be. I think there are layers to the world. I always imagined, ever since I've been a little boy, I've loved to imagine that there are things going on out there that we don't know about, in the dark corners and the hidden places. And I like to ask questions about those things. So I think asking questions, but anything, I mean, reading is a great way. Movies, you never know when the next idea is going to come along. It might be when I'm driving along the street and an idea just flashes into my head like a flashbulb, but most of it comes from asking questions for me. Yeah.
Kind of linked to this is Matteo, who is 11, would like to know how did you become an author?
Okay. I think there's no sort of set rules to become an author, but I think the 3 things that you have to do are to read a lot. You have to read a lot because by reading you'll find out what makes a good story. Write a lot, because writing's like anything else. If you want to do it, then you have to practice at it. And when you start to write, you will probably find that you copy the style of the authors who you love to read in the beginning, and that's okay. But then you find your own style. The more you write, the more you find what they call your voice, your own. It's like a fingerprint. Everyone's voice is different. And the third thing is you have to learn not to take no for an answer to be a writer, because every writer has rejection letters, whether they be from agents or publishers or whatever. You have to believe in what you are doing. So the way that I became a writer was, I was really fortunate to have parents who said, do you know what, if you work hard, you can do it. So I went away and I worked hard and I practiced and I continued to read, I continued to write. And when I thought I was ready and I started to send my stuff off to publishers and agents, when the letters came back, because it was letters back then, I'm very old, when the letters came back and said, not for us, no thanks, I didn't give up. I didn't like say, okay, it's not going to happen. I just kept going and going and going. I always tell young readers when I'm going around schools that you can have 1,000 no's, but all it takes is one yes, and everything changes. And that's the way I looked at it all the way along. And finally, when that yes comes, it's so worth all the work that you've put in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aware that we are running out of time. Are you happy to just add them? I've got 2 more that have just come in. So
Yeah.
if you're okay to just squeeze them in.
Yeah, go for it.
Great. Okay. So penultimate question is, Mandy says that she really liked Shadowsmith and she was wondering if there will be a sequel.
Shadowsmith, at the moment, it's a one-off, but there are ideas in my head for. My problem is I like shiny new things, and I like to go and do something else. But there are ideas there for another Shadowsmith. So never say never, but there's nothing imminent.
Right.
Okay.
Also, just Matteo, who had asked about being an author, has just said that he hasn't read your book so far, but after this, he's going to read them all. So.
Oh wow! Good. Well, I hope you enjoy.
Oh, also just Gavin, who's a middle grade booktuber, is watching and says hi. But the last question I'm going to ask you is from Janet, who is 6, which is, how do you come up with the titles, what names of your books?
Oh, I don't know about you, but sometimes naming the book is as difficult as writing the book.
Oh, do you find I'm terrible at titles. Yeah.
Like really short story about the Nowhere Emporium, for instance.
The Nowhere Emporium. Great title.
Oh, it was originally not called the Nowhere Emporium. It was originally called the Wonder Emporium. And then, not long before publication, I got a really frantic email from my editor saying, we have just discovered that there is actually quite a famous movie called Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, and it's about a toy shop. And now the Nowhere Emporium isn't a toy shop, but as soon as I learned that there was a film with the name that I wanted to call my book, I had to go and watch it, like through like my fingers to make. I was really terrified that I was going to watch a movie that was really similar to the book I'd written. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But we had to come up with a new name, and we went back and forward for weeks. What about this? What about that? What about blah 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 blah? And eventually, the Nowhere Emporium just sort of popped into my head because the shop comes from nowhere and it disappears again. And I've actually come to like that name better than the original name. So I think some things are meant to be.
Yeah.
Evernight was a simple one because there's a spell in Evernight which puts the sun out and casts the world into darkness. So Evernight was just made sense.
Yeah.
But some are really difficult to name, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. Also, I need to correct. Sorry, Janet. Janet is in year 6. She's not 6. She's 10.
Okay.
So sorry, Janet. Right, I'm aware that we're already running over, so I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you for all of your questions. I hope I've tried to ask at least one from people have been asking multiple questions, but I think I've asked one question from everyone who's asking questions. Right, we're going to finish as we always do with a kind of a bookshop recommendation and a writing prompt. So to start with, we're going to ask Ross for his bookshop recommendation.
Okay, well, I have 2. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I recently discovered 7 Stories in Newcastle. Has anyone? Oh my goodness, I love that so much. 7 Stories in Newcastle. It's not just a bookshop. It's like a museum. It's a place to go and find out about children's authors and all that sort of stuff. It's just an amazing place. So 7 Stories, love it so much. And the second one is a place called the Old Bank Bookshop in Wigton. Wigton is a town in the southwest of Scotland. It's called Booktown for good reason. It's a tiny little town and it has like so many bookshops. And the Old Bank Bookshop specializes in like secondhand and antique books and rare books. And if you walk into this place, it's like walking into a shop from Harry Potter. There are so many little corners and nooks and crannies, and you never know what you're going to discover there. You never know. Like you're going to, everywhere you look, there's magic. So those would be my 2.
Amazing. Yeah. I've not been to Wigtown yet. I'm desperate to go, but yeah, 7 Stories is just a magical place. Right, to finish off, I've asked Ross to come up with a kind of writing prompt so that anyone who's watching, if you want to do some of your own writing this afternoon, then you've got some inspiration. People have been asking about, where you get your ideas from. So here is maybe an idea to kind of kickstart a story. So Ross, what's your writing prompt?
Right. Well, I read you a piece of the chapter called Spell Writing, and my challenge to you is to go away and write a spell just like Lara learned to do in the book. So I've done this before at school visits, and it's always worked really well. And the way we do it is you name your spell, and you write a short description of what your spell does, maybe the color it is, what it smells of, all that sort of stuff. And then you draw the symbols which are the ingredients of your spell. So for instance, Lara was making a light spell. She drew the sun, she drew an eye for color, she drew a flower for life, all that sort of thing. And the beauty of this is that no two spells are the same, and your symbols only have to make sense to you. So it's always really interesting to see how different people interpret the different spells. So does that make sense? So if you go away and write your own spell, and I would love to see some of those.
Fab. And maybe this video will still be up on my YouTube channel. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to process, but you could go back and re-watch the reading that Ross does, maybe for some inspiration. But that's a great one. Yeah, as always, if you are writing, write mainly for yourself. There's no obligation to share what you write with anybody else, but if you did want to share it, then both Ross and I would love to read it, and I will put information about where you can find us on social media in the description, as well as all the information about where you can find Ross's books and the bookshops that Ross has mentioned. Right, we are out of time, we're over time. So I will be back on Wednesday with LD Lipinski, the author of The Strange Worlds Travel Agents, which comes out this week. And on Friday, I'll be back with SF Said, author of Varjak Poor. So I hope I will see plenty of you on Wednesday and Friday. Thank you to everyone who's watched and asked questions, fab questions today. And of course, the biggest thank you of all is to Ross. Thank you so much for doing this and asking questions, answering questions, and giving us a bit of a taste of Evernight. As I said, all the details about the book I'll put in the description box. So thank you so much, Ross, for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for everyone who watched.
Fab. Right, we are going to go offline now. Thank you again, everyone who's watching. I have not yet worked out how to take this offline off YouTube without it being a really abrupt ending. So advance apologies for it just cutting out, which it's about to do. Bye.